the Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network presents Worldview Media Podcast, where Gordon and Joyce Runyon view popular media through the lens of the biblical five-point covenant model to help believers appreciate and apply principles of exciting narrative and engaging storytelling.
Hello.
Hello.
Coming to you live from Studio 3. It's the Worldview Media Podcast. I'm your co-host, Gordon Runyon, pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Tucumcari, and with me today is a woman who, with the help of a killer robot from the future, fought her way out of a mental institution. My wife, Joyce.
That's right. I was put there unjustly.
Unjustly. It was a miscarriage of justice, for sure.
Right. Why, whatever could we be talking about today?
Right, and what is normal anyway? I mean, seriously. Okay.
Okay.
You know, I was going to say, and with me is a woman who, like many of our listeners, sleeps through portions of the podcast. Especially in Studio 3.
It's only when I'm ill and close to death.
In the throes of the consumption.
Speaking of.
Hang on, Ma. The doc's coming to bleed you.
The consumption.
Okay, well, so here we are. Our topic today is the movie from the 90s, Terminator 2.
Terminator 2. T2.
Right. So we're going to talk about the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and there were three, as far as I know. There may be something else. There were three Terminator movies.
The original.
Yeah. The original, which was 1, and then this one, which is 2, and then the next one, which is sometimes called 3.
What was that one really called?
The Rise of the Machines.
I thought there was a Salvation or a...
See, I'm thinking there's other Terminator stuff that we don't know about. Terminator 3 was so bad, I don't remember it.
You've blocked it out.
I'm fairly sure I saw it, but I don't remember it. I think Terminator Salvation might have been like a TV series.
I thought it was another movie, but this had a female Terminator in it.
Yeah, I don't know. You've gone beyond my level of Terminator knowledge.
Well, I know I didn't see the last two, or at least I have no memory of them.
Okay. So, in the Terminator franchise, science fiction franchise, the concept is that a corporation called Cyberdine Systems creates a computer system that pretty much is capable of governing everything. And
well, it becomes sentient. Sentient.
There's a point in time where it becomes self-aware and quickly decides to eliminate humanity. And it does so by launching missiles from the United States into the then Soviet Union, and they retaliate and launch
catastrophic
nuclear warheads
ensue.
And it pretty much destroys everything. And so what happens is the remnant of humans who remain find themselves being hunted down and exterminated by Skynet and machines. They have like robot aircraft, spacecraft, and they have these robot soldiers that are called Terminators, and they're tough as nails, hard to destroy, and so it's a big battle between the remnant of humanity and the Terminators. And at one point, the leader of the human resistance, named John Connor, finds a way through Skynet's technology, finds a way to send people back, or machines back.
Only one thing can go back.
Yeah. Well, the first time he sends a human back to save his mom. See what Skynet decides. it somehow has time travel technology, and it decides to send back a Terminator to eliminate John Connor's mom so that Connor himself is not born, and then
There's no
he
resistance.
can't lead the resistance.
Yeah.
And in the first movie, then, John Connor uses the same time travel technology to send a human savior back to try to rescue Sarah Connor and fight the Terminator. So in Terminator 2...
But wait, this one guy isn't just the one to protect her.
He winds up being his own father.
Not his own father, but John Connor's own father.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the guy is not his own father. I have my own grandpa. Remember that dumb song?
You gotta stop making me laugh.
Hang on, Ma.
I think you like me coughing too much.
Okay. So,
You have a drink break.
I'm just going to leave that in the podcast. And so, continuing to recap things, then in Terminator 2, the Skynet decides to go after John Connor himself after he was a teenager. So Skynet sends a Terminator back to destroy John Connor, and adult John Connor captures a Terminator and reprograms it and makes
Well, it doesn't say all of that.
Yeah, it does.
Well, okay. When?
At the very beginning.
Oh, when he's talking to the boy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he reprograms Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator and sends him back to protect himself when he was a little kid. To protect the boy.
When he was a Ute.
He was a Ute. Yeah. All right. And so the Terminator that is sent back in this movie is a new, more advanced model.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's tough and all that, but this bad guy's tougher and more
He's the
advanced.
latest technology.
Yeah, he's a big deal. He's like the T-1000 or what's the T-3000 or something.
Yeah, he's improved.
And Schwarzenegger's model is like 7B or something.
Yeah, 0.
Terminator 3 comes around, and like I say, I don't remember it.
Okay.
So we're looking at Terminator 2, and there are some worldview issues that are prominent that we'll talk about, but here we want to just talk about overall impression and what you thought about the quality of the movie itself. Understanding what it was at the time it was a summer blockbuster, sci-fi, special effects, action adventure with Arnold. And but what do you think?
Well, I think it's still a pretty good movie. It doesn't go off the rails like maybe some of the later movies.
Oh yeah.
So it was still sometimes when you have that second movie that comes out, it's really not as good as the first one, or you're like, they were just trying to go on the head of steam they had off the first and get some more revenue built in. But it's a pretty good movie, and I like the transition in the character of Sarah Connor, because in the first movie she's really kind of a helpless person, scared and freaked out and can't believe this is happening, and you see that she's really transformed herself in this one, and she's ready to go out and do some business. Even though she is in an institution at the present, she's always trying to break out and get out and find her son, and she's got a mission, and she's intent on that, on achieving that in whatever way she can. And of course we get to meet John as a younger person who thinks his mother really is crazy.
Yeah.
He was with her running it down south, not knowing what was normal.
Right.
Thinking that was normal, and somehow
she's on a mission. She's basically homeschooling him, where the only subject of the education was to
military
train him to be a soldier.
Yeah.
Right. And then he kind of freaks out when he realizes, wow, it's all true.
Yeah.
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 Well, I thought just in terms of the movie as a movie, just an escape thing, I thought it really was a really fun action adventure. The chase scenes were really pretty incredible. And a lot of the action was just really fun. And, you know, they combined the sci-fi element with stuff. And it's a fun movie, pretty tense.
Well, you can tell it's an older movie, but
Yeah.
it doesn't look like a cheesy movie,
Right.
even though you've had this passage of time, and it's been, it's been a while since it was made, and it still has a good quality.
For everybody that was wondering, the nuclear war was supposed to have started in 97.
So they changed the future.
They were successful. So I didn't have a whole lot of problems with storytelling and stuff like that. And I thought, looking back on it, some of teenage John Connor's lines are kind of cheesy and all that. It is an 80s movie.
Yeah.
And so it comes with its own amount of cheese.
Well, and they were looking for the infamous taglines and.
Oh, yeah. Hasta la vista, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some of that stuff in there, too.
Right. Okay, so overall, if you're just looking for an hour and a half of just kind of escapist action stuff, it's not a bad flick.
Although we had noticed on this version that we had that there were some new scenes that we didn't really remember from.
Yeah. It was an expanded version we saw.
Yeah. And I think your comment was, didn't really need them.
Right, they were deleted for a reason. They didn't really add anything. So let's take our break and we'll come back and talk a little bit more in depth. Take it away, Mr. Sanchez.
The Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network brings to you a complete lineup of podcasts where you will hear practical and tactical theology. Our desire is not simply that you consume our shows, but that you also live out your faith in every area of life. We can talk all day long about these things, but if we fail to put them into practice, then we fail as ambassadors of Jesus Christ, our King. Subscribe now to your favorite Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network shows, or you can subscribe to the Reconstructionist Radio Master Feed, where all of the content we produce, including the audiobooks and audio articles, will pop up as soon as they are available. And don't forget to visit reconstructionistradio.com to volunteer as a narrator or to partner with this ministry financially. May the Holy Spirit stir you into action for Christ and His kingdom.
All right, we're back. We're talking about Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and we're going to kind of try to apply the lens of the biblical 5-point covenant model and determine what kind of worldview is being preached here. And the first point in the covenant is transcendence, and a lot of the time in fiction, this is where you'll run into like thematic statements that have big picture, this is how the world works sort of topics. And in Terminator 2, there's a line that's repeated several times. John Connor mentions it's a line that his mom drilled into him while she's training him in combat and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that line is, there's no fate but the one we make. And so time travel is a big deal in this movie, and the issue is if you could go back and in time and change the future to avoid a really horrible tragedy, but you had to, the only way to do it was by killing somebody who hadn't yet done anything wrong. wasn't yet a villain, but you could kill them and avoid the whole thing. It would be like kind of if you could go back in time and stop World War II and the genocide in Germany, if you could stop all that by assassinating Hitler's mom or something before she gave birth to him, would you take that opportunity? And what would the ethics be in that? And so...
Well, I think, first of all, you need to see that they have a random perspective of the timeline.
Yeah. The future's not fixed, is what they say.
It's all just, it's random. So if you just can do something to alter it, then you can do whatever you want to.
Right.
But that's of course saying, well, who is sovereign? Is anyone sovereign?
Right. Well, it would seem to be the closest thing to sovereign would be the one who had the time machine, you know?
So it would have to be science then.
Yeah, I guess so.
You know, because if you have the technology and the wherewithal to build this thing where it works and you can go back, then...
Yeah, then what would stop
then you would be sovereign.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny to me because it's called Judgment Day, but, you know, they really want to not face Judgment Day.
Yeah, they're avoiding Judgment Day.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that phrase, there's no fate other than the one we make. That's a very humanistic way of looking at time and history. And the Christian view, fate really is a pagan view. The Bible doesn't teach a fate or a fatalistic sort of thing. Calvinists get accused of believing in a fatalistic view of history, and we really don't. That's not what the Bible teaches. I believe the Bible teaches a soft determinism, which is much different than fate, such that I think the truth is that our unforced decisions, our choices, and the things that we do, those tend to reveal the will and plan of God for our lives. God's plan is very often revealed by what we choose to do. And fate is very much different, where, you know, the classic example, if you're sick with a fatal disease and you're offered the medicine that will cure you, a fatalist would say, well, if I'm fated to live, then I'll live, and it won't matter if I take the medicine or not, because it's fate. And if I'm fated to die, then it won't matter if I take the medicine, because I'll die anyway.
Wasn't that also a nod back to mythology with the...
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, the Greeks had the fates, who, I believe the fates were even in charge of the gods. And
they had the scissors.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to note that a belief in fate eliminates the importance of your choices.
Of your personal actions.
Yeah, nothing you do. Since nothing you do matters. And I think there's something to be said about that in terms of Arminianism and synergism, because if you demand that God really doesn't have a plan except for what you choose, you're kind of in the same place. And you're ignoring the decree of God for history and all. And so I think the humanist cry is, if we're under God, then it's his plan and not our choices that are important. And so we're going to rebel against that idea, and instead we're going to say, there's no fate but the one we make. When really the truth of the matter is that God's plan, his determination of the outworking of history, includes the choices that you make. And his plan works through those choices and is compatible with them. And so we all every day make a myriad of unforced choices.
Which are real.
Yeah, they're real choices, and we make them based on what we most desire in any circumstance. And so we do have that measure of freedom. God allows us to choose that which we most desire, as long as it's consistent with our nature. And if God's in charge, then you're not going to change the future by making a choice, because your choice is already part of God's plan, whatever that choice is.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. But But you really are right that the movie itself, then, by saying there's no fate but what we make, it really is an attempt to get rid of the notion of God and a plan for history.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have pointed out, if there's not a plan for history, then there's no meaning to history either. And God didn't mean us to learn or anything like that. Okay, so as far as transcendence goes, then Terminator 2 images a world where there's no God in charge of history. And in fact, the closest you get to that is people making decisions and performing actions. And that's what's really in charge. And like you mentioned, if you then have the technology or the wherewithal to go back and change things, that really puts you in an even more godlike position there. Okay, and then point 2 of the covenant is hierarchy or representation. And if there's a character in the movie that seems to embody or live out that basic worldview, I think it's got to be Sarah Connor. Do you feel like?
I was thinking about her.
She's the one, her whole life is kind of bent on trying to do what she can to change the future or the future that she believes is on its way. She's going to try to make choices and decisions to affect the impact and cause her own son to survive. And so she's going to modify the future by her choices now. Really, I don't think that's too much of a... There's some truth to that. I mean, we don't know the future infallibly, but we do have broad outlines of the future in the Bible, and that really should affect choices that we make and decisions and how we live now. And I think that obviously is true when you contrast what I think is a biblical eschatology with the defeatism of, say, dispensationalism. If you really believe that things are going down the drain and that's how they're supposed to go, and you're not going to change that really can do nothing other than affect.
Positive.
Yeah, how's that not going to affect your decision making? And specifically when it comes time to think about investing in long-term goals and accomplishments and stuff. You know, if you believe all your endeavors are doomed to failure and, you know, the world's on the way down, why would you continue to build? And like the dispensationalists have said, that if you work for making things better or reforming things here on the earth, that's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And, you know, it's not going to keep the ultimate fate from happening.
Well, and I think we talked about this just a little bit when we were watching the season finale of the Curse of Oak Island, that a lot of our thinking with how we have to build things and our timelines, and we don't want anything to take any amount of time. You know, it's all about, well, we got to get it done in 5 months. We got to get it done in 3 months. We got to get it done
Right.
in 6 months. And yet all over in Europe, they have these spectacular buildings that took decades to build.
Right.
And they were okay with it taking decades to build.
Right, because they wanted something that was going to last for centuries.
And then, you know, the thing of it also is they didn't used to live that long either.
Right.
So maybe their whole life they spent working on this one thing.
Sure.
And maybe you never even saw it completed. So just a real change in how we look at time and how we value time as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, our perspective has been changed, I think, by dispensationalism especially. It's not just that we're a microwave culture or that sitcoms have trained us that every problem needs to be resolved in 22 minutes. It's not just that. It's the fact that our theology has told us this is the last generation and we're out of here. And that's going to change how long you feel like you can wait for results.
Yeah.
For sure. So Sarah Connor, and to a lesser extent, really every other character in the show, tends to represent that idea of a purposeless history and future. And then we come to the third point of the covenant, which is ethics. And this is, in the Bible, this is all the commandments that deal with you should do this and you shall not do this. And in literature and in the movies that we watch, we ask the question, how do our characters face significant moral dilemmas? And that's going to reveal something about the worldview. The big moral dilemma that sticks in my mind, you might think of something other than this, but when Sarah Connor makes the decision that she can stop Skynet by murdering the computer scientist who is responsible for getting the ball rolling, that's a significant moral dilemma that she has there. And what I thought was interesting about it in terms of storytelling is when she goes to kill this guy and her initial attempt is unsuccessful, it shows then she just destroys everything around, and it shows her stalking the guy, and he's terrified, and here comes Sarah Connor. She's loaded for bear, and she's going to kill him, and she's just walking purposely toward him to do that. It strikes me that in that moment she had become a Terminator.
Herself,
yeah, and that Skynet's original strategy that they were going to kill her to eliminate John Connor, now she's using the exact same strategy. She's going to go wipe out this innocent guy who, doesn't intend any evil at all and hasn't done this thing yet. She's going to wipe him out and get the future that she desires. And so I thought that was a striking image that I'm not sure it was intentional, but for me, I saw it that in that moment she had adopted a Terminator philosophy and had become one herself. And I thought that was interesting. And like I say, it does go back to those sorts of moral dilemmas. If you could go back and kill Hitler when he was a baby, just a cute little baby in the crib, would you do it? And knowing that you could save all this turmoil in the future. And so to me, that's an interesting moral dilemma. Also, the book that Stephen King wrote called The Dead Zone was about a guy who develops psychic powers, and he's able to see that this one particular politician in the future will, maybe bring on nuclear war. And he has an opportunity to assassinate this politician. And will he take it? What will he do? And that was kind of the same moral dilemma there.
But in the movie, you have then the son coming and rescuing his mom from that situation, and then they explain to the computer guy, this is what the deal is, and of course he's shocked and appalled.
Right.
Never saw that end from what he was doing there, and his immediate response is, we got to destroy everything.
Right.
Everything in my house, everything at the business, let's go and do it. And so, just getting him on board.
Yeah, I think that was the other moral dilemma I had in mind. This scientist guy himself is faced with a dilemma. They have to first they have to convince him that their version of the future is real and it's the one that's coming. Thankfully they have this killer robot from the future who
has the same hand that's in his office. Yeah.
So they're able to prove it to him, but now he's got to decide, do I give up everything that I've been working for based on really what just these kooks that were shooting at me 2 minutes ago, what now they're telling me. So that was significant. And he, of course, decides, like you said, that he's got to help them modify the future.
Well, and I think you see that again, this programmer guy, when they're at the office and things kind of go south.
Yeah.
And they've got all these explosives set up, and somehow he winds up with a detonator.
Yeah.
And he makes it, he knows he's going to die.
Yeah.
And he lets Sarah know I'm pretty much done for. And she's like, all right, I'm going to leave then. But all these other tactical officers that are in there trying to subdue the situation, you know, he could have taken them out with him.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. You know, he held on, and they came up, and they're like looking at him, and he's like, look, I'm not going to be able to do this much longer. And they're like, everybody get out.
Right.
And so I just thought that was really interesting to have a character do that, because that's not what happens all the time today in our movies, where you have a character that's going to die, and they're just like, well, if I'm going, I'm not going alone.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then the other moral question that I thought was funny, how they explored it. Teenage John Connor is trying to tell his Terminator that's protecting him, he's trying to convince him that he can't be killing people.
Yeah.
And his answer is always, why? Because you just can't. Why? And because you just can't, okay? And you know, he never had a better answer for that. The movie itself never had a better answer for why can't. If I've been designed to kill humans, how come now I can't kill humans? Well, you just can't. Well, why not?
What gives them value?
And it's never answered or addressed. And they kind of come back to it at the end of the movie, but there's still not an answer given. It was a funny scene where the Terminator was just about to shoot a guy, and John stops him, and then the guy runs away, and John says, "You were going to kill that guy." And he says, "Of course, I'm a Terminator." You know, like, what do you expect me to do? I felt like that was a ethical dilemma that they addressed, but they had no...
Well, they didn't have an answer because...
They had no basis for addressing it.
Well, there was no answer in the way the whole movie was coming from, because if there's no fate, there's nobody in charge, there's nobody...
Right.
Why does it matter?
Right.
Yeah, they're just under the premise of where they were coming from. There really wasn't an answer.
Right.
But you do see that John is concerned with the people around him. You know, even with his bad foster parents, that I've got to call and let them know.
Yeah.
They're in trouble, and the Terminator tells them, well, they're already dead.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what we always say. The atheist can be a good and moral person, you know, on a human level. He can be polite and gracious and charitable. It's just that his worldview doesn't give him any reason why he should be those things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where we run into so much trouble in our society that, well, this was a good guy. And so because he was a good guy, because he was kind, because he was thoughtful, because he was caring, then he should be in a good place.
Oh, yeah. Surely God will let him into heaven.
Yeah, and that's not, you know, unfortunately, that's not what the equation is for admission. And so I think that's really sad.
Okay, so the ethics of the movie were kind of consistent with the presuppositions of the movie, I thought. Mm-hmm. And then, or at least they had better ethics than their presupposition in you know, John's reluctance to see people killed and all that. Okay, so point 4, the covenant is sanctions, and where we talk about do people get what they deserve, and I'm not sure that much blame can be assigned in a lot of places. Sarah Connor winds up kind of getting what she wanted the whole time. Mm-hmm. She walks away feeling like they had changed the future at the end of the movie. That's what it seemed like. No, I think in Terminator 3 it winds up that they did not, from what I remember, and I don't.
Well, I always wondered what happened to the little hand that got stuck in the gears.
Yeah.
Where did that go?
Yeah, for those of you keeping track, Cyberdine Systems had rescued a hand and a partial processor chip from the first Terminator. Mm-hmm. And that was what they were using. They were kind of reverse engineering to create this advanced stuff. And so now at the end of the movie, the Arnold Terminator insists that he needs to be completely destroyed too, to just get rid of this technology, and so they do that. But earlier in
a fight scene,
he had lost an arm inside a couple of giant gears, and as far as we know, it's left there, right?
Yeah.
And so there's still a hand from the future.
There's pieces or something, yeah. So
there's not a processor though, so
no, there shouldn't be a processor, but
then I do think in the third movie that it comes out that they were not successful in stopping the Judgment Day, that it happened anyway, which then their view of time becomes something more like what Doctor Who has, where in Doctor Who you can go back and change some things,
but some are set points.
There are set points that are fixed, and not even a Time Lord like Doctor Who can mess with those.
Can reverse that.
And it's never really answered, well, who decides that these things are fixed? Somebody's fixing these points, and who's doing that? It's somebody higher than the Time Lords and all that. And kind of seems like the same view of time travel eventually gets brought into the Terminator franchise there, where some things you can change and some things are going to happen no matter what you do, which oddly enough becomes a version of fate again.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the programmer guy got what he deserved.
No, he got sanctions pretty rough on him. And it wound up being voluntary there at the end, I guess.
But still kind of imposed on him in a way.
Yeah, he had been shot and was probably going to die anyway, regardless of what he did.
So I don't think he got what he deserved.
Yeah.
And you don't really... They end the movie saying, well, now we just don't know what the future's going to hold because we've accomplished all these things. So, what is going to happen? And so...
Yeah.
I think, is that more scary than the other one?
Well, there's still no plan. It's all in the dark. And they said the future was like a dark highway, and you only get to see what's illuminated
just
in
right
your headlights.
In front of your, and I thought, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, how is that better?
I hate driving like that.
Right. Well, that's what always gets me about people who despise the thought that God is in charge even when bad things happen, or that he's the one that has ordained that bad things happen. There are people who really hate that thought, but what's the alternative? That he didn't want these things to happen and they happened anyway? Or that he didn't have a plan that they would happen, and therefore there can't be any meaning behind them happening? And how is that more comforting? That kind of shocks me a little bit. And then you kind of mentioned at the end of the movie, we do kind of get into point 5 of the covenant in terms of succession and what's going to be the result of the actions that have taken place in this movie, and what's the future hold. And
we can't know anything.
Yeah, consistent with the beginning presuppositions, it's all up in the air. With kind of the admonition, the future, we've avoided this bad future, and now who knows? So go out there and give it your best shot, or whatever,
Yeah.
Which is
kind of
not
silly.
terribly inspiring.
Yeah. Well, it is a Terminator movie.
Right, it is a Terminator movie. That's true. All right. So you have anything else?
I just think it ends kind of flat.
Yeah.
To me, for all the drama and the
it's kind
intensity,
of a letdown,
and then it's
ending.
just like I'm driving down a dark road and I can't see nothing. And
it just kind of peters out, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. It reminds me of the men love darkness instead of light, and they think that the light that they shine on their path is enough to illuminate their way, and they're just in the dark.
Yeah.
And they don't know where they're going.
Good one.
And, what is your destination? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you can. You don't need to be on that broad road in the dark.
Repent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so that was Terminator 2. I think we both enjoyed it. It's just kind of a fun movie to watch, and
well, it was a memory,
and especially with the 80s cheesiness, that's kind of funny too when it happens. It probably wasn't at the time, but now it's kind of funny.
Kind of funny.
I think just before we go, though, it was a while back we did a podcast on a reality show called The Curse of Oak Island. And the current season for that show has ended. And
now we're all in a better place.
And I just thought we'd revisit it because the final episode, well, the episodes that have been broadcast since we podcast about it really have really been pretty significant in showing that a lot of the elaborate rumors about what was going on Oak Island, that there's more evidence than ever that
seems more foundational now.
That there really was this tunnel system 150 feet beneath the island that was dug out by
who knows
people in the Middle Ages, and that they really did construct a booby trap system that would let in seawater if somebody tried to get in there the wrong way, and that, you know, they found gold from 150 feet under and stuff like that. And so the really kind of the wild things where you think, okay, if all the weirdness is true, this is going to be how it is. And now they've got serious hard evidence that it is true. And
they still haven't found it.
Well, they haven't found the big stuff yet. But, you know, that's where you and I got to talking about how the men in charge of the search, the Lagina brothers, that they do seem to have an unusual amount of patience for people of our day.
Yeah.
And they are willing to invest.
And take the time.
And take the time and do it right. And they're happy to, you know, like Edison said, he didn't fail 100 times on his way to creating a light bulb. He just found 99 ways not to create a light bulb, you know, and the Laginas kind of seem to be the same way, where they're willing to take negative results as progress, because now they know where the treasure isn't. And it's just kind of an amazing, I don't know where they got it from, but they have a kind of an unusual view that allows them to be patient.
Well, I think the older brother more so maybe than the younger brother.
Yeah.
I think he gets a little bit more frustrated and like,
the little brother.
Can't we just say, okay, and we're done?
Yeah. The younger brother's pulling his hair out a lot more than the older brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we just thought we'd revisit that because, wow, crazy stuff really happening there.
I know.
All
and
right.
so far underground, it's amazing.
It is.
Amazing.
It is. All right, just for the two of you who are still listening at this point of the podcast, thanks for joining us again on Worldview Media Podcast, where we're trying to learn as storytellers and media creators to tell stories that manage to preach a biblical worldview without having to sound all preachy about it. All right. Well, so until next week, God bless y'all. Say bye, Mama.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Worldview Media Podcast. Please visit reconstructionistradio.com to check out the other podcasts in our network and to download our free audiobooks.